Good to see you all here. Good morning. Some pretty odd stuff is going on. Bill Gates is at it yet again, and the new plan involves something entirely different. The new plan involves, well, cutting down forests and then burying the trees. You heard that right. Um, I don't know where they come up with this stuff. I mean, technically, he's not the one doing this. It's a company that has created a new product, a new method of fighting climate change, and they say it'll protect us from wildfires. It's good for the environment, or at least good on the climate change agenda, because forests and trees, they're fire hazards, and if trees were somehow to catch on fire, well, that just causes climate change. And so this is not even joking the narrative right now. Let's start by showing y'all. Let me show you this first, folks. All right, let's see here. Let me open this up for you. This is Forbes. They had the story on it, and Forbes said this: chop down forests to save the planet? Maybe not as crazy as it sounds. I'll say honestly, if you don't think that's crazy, you're crazy. let's just say it like it is, right? But this is what they write. They say Bill Gates and other investors are betting Kadama systems can reduce carbon dioxide in the air by chopping down and burying trees. Now, if only Uncle Sam would get on board with tax credits too. Okay, so first of all, don't trees breathe carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen? You'd think you'd actually want more trees if you were trying to actually, if you actually believed this whole narrative around, CO2 and the climate change threat. If you actually believed it, you would think maybe the solution is plant more trees. It actually creates a greenhouse gas effect if you were to believe in the narrative, even that there's a problem in the first place, which there is not. And I'll show you that after this, but I can't show you it on YouTube because 1,600 scientists have now come out basically just tossing the entire narrative out and saying it's a bunch of nonsense. But we'll have to show you that on Epoch TV because we can't talk about it on YouTube. But let me go into this first. They say this further in. Logging, the company, what it does is nighttime logging and stuff. They say logging in the dark isn't the most intriguing part of the plans of Kadama, which has raised $6.6 million in seed funding from Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy and others. After cutting down the trees, right? They go cut down the trees, nighttime cutting, they can work all through the day and night. After cutting down the trees, Jenkins plans to bury them to help slow to help slow climate change. They plan to bury them to help slow climate change and to re-up saleable carbon offsets. And maybe someday tax credits too. Yes, the conventional idea is to plant trees to soak up carbon dioxide, you don't say, from the air, and then sell credits to corporations, private jet owners, and others who need who need or want to offset their emissions. But scientists say, I don't know where they're finding these scientists, by the way, but they apparently have some scientists, quote unquote, who are saying this. Scientists say burying trees can reduce global warming as well. This is Forbes, folks. This isn't like The Onion. This isn't Babylon Bee. This is Forbes. Maybe it's kind of close anyways, but this is Forbes saying this. Scientists say burying trees can reduce global warming. Where do they find these people? They say, particularly if those trees would otherwise end up burning or decaying, spewing their stored carbon into the air. Yeah, how dare those trees just waiting to burst into flames and create global warming. It's been the trees all along. They're just sitting there. Yeah, they soak up carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, but they're just sitting there growing and waiting until they can burst into flames and spew their held up carbon dioxide. They're held up carbon, according to Forbes. They say California's enormous 2020 wildfires drove home the risk to air, property, and life posed by overgrown forests. All right, stick with me 1 second longer because I'll go over one more part of this because I want you all to read it. I want you all to hear this. They say this further in. To help address the problem, the U.S. Forest Services aims to thin out 70 million acres of western forests, mostly in California, over the next decade, extracting more than 1 billion tons of bone-dried biomass. It is customary of such forest thinning for logs of marketable size to go to sawmills. With most of the rest piled up and later burned under controlled conditions. Kadama wants to bury the leftovers instead in earthen vaults similar to designed to maintain dry and oxygen-free conditions and protect the wood from rotting or burning. So in other words, when normally when you cut down trees, when you're a lumberjack, when you have a lumber company, you're selling the lumber to build houses, to people buying from Home Depot or whatever, or Lowe's, wherever they get them at now. And then it helps with construction. It helps with building cabinets and building household items. Normally, people need to purchase timber, and when you cut down trees, a natural product of that is timber. They're arguing that they want to, rather than sell the timber, take all that wood and just bury it, because they're saying that that is a better solution. The whole nature of this, though, is these whole tax credits and saleable carbon offsets. And so, in other words, this is a business. This is a business because they're getting money to create carbon offsets. And this is what Bill Gates is financing, at least one of them. So the way this works, right? This is how the racket works. If you can create a product or a new thing and you claim that doing so offsets carbon emissions or whatever like that, right? Then by doing so, you get paid for it by, certain states. I don't know if the whole country does this. Saleable carbon offsets is what they're calling it, and then maybe someday tax credits. And so you can imagine a big corporation being like, okay, let's get some tax credits so we don't have to pay so much in taxes. What do we do? Hey, well, how do we measure carbon? How do you measure carbon emissions? Well, cars create a bit, but what creates the most carbon? Well, forest fires. Actually, forest fires do create a lot of carbon. You can have these wildfires, and they'll throw more carbon in the air than all the cars in the whole country combined for an entire year sometimes. They can use that as a potential, hypothetically speaking, if a forest fire were to take place, all these trees would create, such and such measurable carbon. Therefore, if we take these trees, chop all of them down, and then bury them, we've offset X amount of potential carbon if a forest fire were to take place. And then they go to the government and they sell those carbon credits, essentially. That's how this ridiculous racket works. I mean, this should be like mafioso type stuff. This should be a criminal racket, and they're making a business out of it. But this is the kind of stuff they're doing. This is the kind of stuff that's happening. Now, of course, Bill Gates is getting pinned for this. He's helping finance it. He's one of the people behind it. But on that note, I was talking about this story with a colleague yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, like where do they find these people, first of all? And we were joking that it would be actually funny if someone were to make like a short film, just imagining if everything that Bill Gates is financing actually came true. Like, you could call it Gates World or something like that. Imagine like a drama that takes every single thing that he's funding and imagines if the whole world did it. So, the sun would be blocked out. You'd have his, aerosols in the stratosphere to reduce the sun rays hitting the earth. They'd chop down the forests and bury the trees. We'd all be drinking sewage water. You'd have like mosquitoes flying around vaccinating people with God knows what. The list goes on. It would be the creepiest dystopian movie probably like ever. It would make 1984 look like Child's Play or something like that. This would be like the most dystopian view of humanity you could probably possibly imagine if you were to take the things these guys are financing and just do them. But here we are, folks. It sounds crazy. It sounds like sci-fi. Um, it sounds like stuff that I would never even imagine in my wildest dreams. But there are people pushing for it. Like, I mean, I should say one other part, by the way. I should say one other part, by the way, which is if if for example we talk, one thing I was wondering is how they came up with this whole wood thing. Like, why would you chop down trees and bury them and think that's a good thing? I think this is my opinion, of course, but fundamentally, I think what this is it's just a racket to make money off carbon credits. This is only a profitable business. This is only feasible because the government will give you these credits for, carbon reduction or whatever. And because fires create a lot of carbon, obviously you burn an object, it creates smoke. The smoke is carbon, and that's going to be denser carbon, carbon emission than, for example, a car makes or even like a power plant makes. This would be like a coal fire plant without scrubbers, basically, but on a huge swath of land. Remember when they were the Canadian? Well, remember when New York turned like blood red and stuff like that because of the Canada fires. Fires do, of course, create carbon. Obviously, it's actually part of like nature and stuff. I would argue it's not damaging to anything. Typically, after fires, you tend to have a greening effect where, a lot of plant life jumps back. Normal forestry management is generally responsible for these things. And also, I mean, not that they're doing it responsibly, but hypothetically speaking, forestry management would be doing controlled burns, and forestry management would be clearing underbrush. In my opinion, the better way to do it would be just to privatize it and make people responsible for their own dang piece of land. But maybe that's too far out these days. But the general idea, though, is that under normal circumstances, you take that wood and sell it. It actually benefits people. People can build homes with it. When they clear forests or whatever else for forestry management, it actually benefits the markets. It keeps costs down on building homes and such. But the thing is now is because they've created this new business of tax credits or whatever else for reducing carbon emissions. There are people, in my opinion, trying to game the system. And they're saying, well, why don't we just hypothetically say that potentially this could create X amount of carbon emissions? You get a couple of your scientist buddies who you went to who are in your fraternity or whatever, and you call them scientists, and they say scientists agree. You get them to sign a paper and say, look at how much this would reduce, and then the governor or whatever else in California is like, hey, great idea, and just signs off on it. Then the company gets stinking rich doing something that is utterly insane. This is a pure example of everything wrong with our society, in my opinion. That said, let's jump over to Epoch TV because I want to talk to you about some stuff that I can't talk about here. I'm always dancing on the edge of it. More than 1,600 scientists, and I would call these real ones, including 2 Nobel laureates, have declared the climate emergency a myth. Let's jump over to Epoch TV for this because YouTube will give me a strike if I talk about this, probably. That said, folks, again, join me briefly before we jump over. What age are we in where the liberals and the environmentalists, the people who are saying save the forests and save the whales, are now like killing the forests and killing the whales, and they think it's a great idea? Anyways, let's jump over to Epoch TV, and then we'll talk about some of the data coming out on climate change, which blows the whole thing out of the water. That said, I will see you on Epoch TV. Let me show you a trailer first. Again, we have a flash sale right now, 25 cents a week. I will see you there. Let's jump over.
What was the process of actually putting this all together?
Many hours of finding the right camera angles and watching it. The first trouble started just after 1 o'clock.
45 pages, here it is right here. Donald Trump has been indicted.
Somber day for the country.
This all happened before President Trump's speech was over.
The founder of the Oath Keepers militia group is headed to prison for more than 18 years.
His lawyers didn't have this video. The video we're watching right now, his own lawyers did not have. There was a big question of what did the people do who actually did enter the building.
This is where we picked it up with the security footage that is new. At this point, the story dramatically changes.
The New Jersey man who assaulted a Capitol police officer on January 6th has been sentenced.
So this was withheld.
This was not shown to the defense.
That could be considered exculpatory evidence. This doesn't seem like what a lot of the media is showing.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is. What we're after is the truth.